Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling heavy inside? Not because of anything obvious, not because someone yelled at you, insulted you, or openly hurt you, but simply because, after being around that person, you felt smaller, you felt confused. Things that once felt clear suddenly became cloudy. And worst of all, you started doubting yourself. If that's ever happened to you, this video is for you, because some forms of manipulation don't come with violence, shouting, or threats. They arrive gently, like care, like a friend who listens, like a loved one who only wants the best for you. But the longer you stay around them, the more you stop being yourself. This video isn't about witches, dark magic, or the supernatural. It's not about superstition or fear-mongering. I'm speaking about something very real, but invisible. I'm speaking about the dark energy that some people carry, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes with intent. And if you're not awake, you may let them step into the brightest part of you and slowly dim it from within. In Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius once said, "When you wake up each morning, remind yourself, you will meet people who are deceitful, jealous, arrogant, and cruel, but they cannot harm you unless you allow them to." So the question is, who have you allowed to step into your inner world? Have you ever let someone manipulate your emotions just because they called it love? Have you ever shared an important plan, a big dream, something close to your heart, and afterward, everything slowly fell apart? Not because of any clear reason, but simply because you told it to someone you shouldn't have. You're not alone in that feeling. And no, you're not crazy for sensing that something's wrong in a relationship that looks perfectly fine on the surface. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be suspicious of everyone, but it does teach you to discern. Discernment isn't about judging others. It's about protecting the most sacred thing inside you, your clarity. Because the truth is, not everyone deserves to know what's going on inside your heart. Not everyone should have the right to question your plans, your feelings, or your decisions. And not everyone who checks in with you every day is someone who actually wants you to be better. We live in an age where manipulation is more subtle than ever. No more shouting, no more obvious control. Instead, sweet words laced with expectations, helpful advice with hidden intent, a glance that makes you feel guilty for simply being true to yourself. And the most dangerous part is, you begin to stop trusting your own intuition. You start thinking, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm selfish, maybe I should stay quiet, share more, change who I am to please them. No, you shouldn't do anything if it means abandoning yourself. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be cold or heartless, but it teaches you one powerful truth. Never trade your inner peace just to keep a relationship that only looks okay on the outside. You have the right to step away. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right not to reply, not to explain, not to defend, not because you're unkind, but because you're awake. Awake to those who show up wearing masks of love, but underneath seek to control. Awake to words that sound like care, but carry control beneath them. Awake to kindness that comes with conditions and closeness that makes you feel small. In this video, I'll share with you 5 clear signs someone may be carrying dark energy and trying to manipulate you, not to make you afraid, but to help you recognize and choose. Choose what to keep, what to let go, and what to never let anyone touch. Your inner being. Remember, not everyone who hurts you is evil, but anyone who causes you to lose your clarity is pulling you away from your truest path. So if you've ever felt like your heart no longer belongs to you after being near someone, if you've ever felt yourself fading in your own decisions, If you've ever felt a certain darkness enter your spirit every time you opened up to someone, then now is the time to pause and bring light, not to blame anyone, but to protect the light within you, the light that carried you through so many storms before you ever met them. There's a truth few people are willing to face. Not everything that hurts you shows up looking like harm. Some of the quietest, deepest wounds come from what appears to be most beautiful: a close relationship, a person who always cares, or a kind of special bond you can't even name. You don't know when it started, but somehow you changed. From someone full of light, you became cautious, confused, unsure if you could trust your own instincts. From someone who once knew exactly what you wanted, you now wait for someone else to validate what you think, or tell you if your feelings are reasonable. It all begins with small steps. A friendly question: "So, what are you working on these days?" A piece of advice that seems harmless. "If I were you, I wouldn't do that." A glance that makes you pause. Are you sure you're on the right path? At first, you think they care. You think it's feedback. You assume it's coming from someone with experience, or at least someone who wants the best for you. But over time, you start noticing you're no longer yourself. You stay silent, not because you're at peace, but because you don't want conflict. You delay your plans, because someone made you feel like they probably won't work. You lie awake wondering, maybe I'm just too sensitive, maybe I'm overreacting. And slowly, you begin adjusting yourself to become the version they can accept. Somewhere along the way, you forgot. You weren't born to please anyone. You don't need permission to live in truth. You don't need to convince anyone for your plans to be valid. Stoicism teaches, the wise do not anchor themselves in the opinions of the crowd, but in the strength of their own reason. So let me ask you, is your reason still strong? Or have you allowed it to bend under voices claiming to be good for you? No one teaches us how to tell the difference between a kind person and a manipulative one, because manipulation doesn't always wear a cruel face. It often wears the face of concern. It often comes from those closest to us, and it often leaves you feeling like you are the problem. That's the most dangerous part of psychological manipulation. It doesn't make you angry. It doesn't drive you to leave. It makes you question yourself. It makes you stay. Even when you're hurting, it makes you attach. Even when you feel suffocated, it makes you compromise. Even when your soul is screaming, don't. I'm not here to tell you to stay or walk away. I'm not here to judge whether your relationship is toxic or just going through a rough patch. I'm here to ask you one question. Do you still see yourself in that relationship? If the answer is no, then it's time to pause. Not to blame anyone, but to reconnect with yourself. Today, people often talk about cutting off toxic relationships, protecting your energy, or cleansing your circle. These sound like modern concepts, but Stoic philosophy spoke of them over 2,000 years ago. Epictetus once said, "We must never allow our souls to be disturbed by emotions coming from others, especially when they draw us away from our reason and integrity." So if someone makes you question your self-worth, if someone makes you feel like you're always in debt to them, if someone causes you to become emotionally dependent without ever forcing you, then it's time to take a step back and look at the full picture. You might be caught in an invisible storm, a form of dark energy, coming from someone you never suspected. They don't have to do anything obvious. All they have to do is touch the weak spot inside you. Your need to be understood, your need to be loved, your need to feel worthy, and slowly, they install a new operating system inside you. Think like them, feel like them, decide like them, live, so you don't disappoint them. You think it's love, you think it's closeness, but if you look deeper, it's manipulation. disguised with care. Marcus Aurelius once warned, "Your true enemy is not what attacks you from the outside, it's what causes you to abandon yourself." And maybe your real enemy right now isn't out there. It's the relationship pulling you away from your inner clarity. In the next parts of this video, I'll help you recognize it more clearly. We'll go through each sign, one by one, not in a sensational way, not to scare you, but the way Stoicism teaches, to observe, to discern, and to act from stillness. You may not be able to change another person, but you can choose who gets to touch your inner world, who's allowed to stay in the space you're cleaning up, and who should leave. Not because you hate them, but because you love your peace more. Don't rush. Don't force anything. Just listen. Because truth, if it's truly the truth, will ring inside you like a bell. Not loud, but unmistakably clear. Let me share with you a few very common situations. Nothing lofty, nothing about celebrities or public figures. Just small, everyday stories, like ones you may have lived through, or are living right now. There's a friend who always asks, "How have you been lately? How's work? Are you thinking of changing jobs? You planning to buy a car?" Every question sounds reasonable, gentle. You feel cared for. You open up. You share your plans, your goals, the dreams you've been quietly nurturing, and you believe they're happy for you because their eyes light up when you talk. But then, somehow, things start falling apart. A deal that seemed certain suddenly falls through. A budding relationship suddenly grows cold. A project you poured your heart into suddenly fails, and you don't know what went wrong. You blame yourself. You think, maybe I'm not good enough. Or worse, maybe I don't deserve it. But there's a question you rarely dare to ask. Did that person, the one I told everything to, truly wish me well? That question is hard to answer, because if the answer is no, then the whole image of friendship, trust, and shared years begins to crumble, and no one wants to believe they've been naive for that long. So you stay silent. You keep showing up. You keep sharing. Even though part of you no longer fully trusts, there's a dangerous kind of manipulation, the kind that wears intimacy. They don't control you through commands. They only need to make you believe, "I can't live without them." And once you believe that, you give them access to every part of your life. Without question, without doubt, you tell them about your family, about the person you love, about the things that hurt you, about the plans you've never told anyone, about the failures you've never admitted. And piece by piece, your life gets peeled away from you. You're no longer the owner of your story. You're just someone keeping them updated on how you're doing. The problem is, they didn't say anything wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't hurt you directly. But the energy they bring is enough to distort all the peace you once had. Every time you meet them, you don't feel lighter. You feel more confused. And strangely enough, you keep going back. That's when you need to be honest. Not with them, but with yourself. Why are you still in a relationship that leaves you lost every time you connect? Maybe you've grown used to putting others in the judge's seat of your life. Maybe you're confusing being checked on with being respected. Maybe you've mistaken closeness for safety. Stoicism teaches us something deep. Whatever causes you to lose your clarity, whether it's love, a bit, or a relationship, must be re-evaluated. You can't keep living in the fog just because you don't want to hurt someone, because while you're trying not to hurt them, you're hurting yourself every single day. Take a step back. Is it possible you're in a relationship where you always feel indebted, not in money, not in favors, but in an invisible feeling? I must share. I must let them know. I must keep this connection. And if you don't, you feel guilty. You feel like the bad person. You feel selfish. You feel like you're not who you used to be anymore. That's a clear sign of an imbalanced emotional bond, a form of manipulation in disguise. Not everyone who manipulates is doing it intentionally. Many of them truly believe they're loving you the best way they know how. But here's the truth. Love that makes you shrink, hide, and lose trust in yourself isn't love. It's control. It's possession. It's a slow drain. You just don't see it right away. In a world full of opinions and advice, Stoicism doesn't come to offer just another philosophy. It comes to remind you, you are responsible for your inner world, and anyone who disturbs it must be re-examined. You don't need to wait for someone to do something wrong in order to step away. All you need is to ask yourself, does their presence make your life feel clearer? Does it make you feel lighter? Does it make you feel full and grounded in yourself? If the answer is no, then you don't need any more proof. The clearest evidence is how you feel after every encounter. And if that feeling is, I no longer feel like myself, then perhaps you already know what needs to be done. Have you ever experienced this feeling? You're around someone who asks a lot of questions but never says anything about themselves. They're curious about your life. They ask about your partner. They ask about your career plans, your family, your relationships, your future goals, even the things you've never told anyone else. At first, you think it's care. You feel like they're truly paying attention to you. You believe they're asking because they want to understand you more, because they care about you, because they're trying to build a connection. But after months, or even years, you realize something. You know nothing about them. They always avoid talking about themselves. Every time you ask, they smile vaguely. Every time you bring something up, they change the subject. You start to feel like something is off, but you don't dare question it. Afraid you'll break the closeness you think you have. This is the first and very subtle sign of someone who carries a controlling energy. They gather information from you to gain power, but they give you nothing in return. So you never truly see who they are. They keep the upper hand. They want to know what you're thinking, what you're doing, where you're going, who you're with, what you're going through. But they don't want you to know any of that about them. They don't use your information harshly. They use it to slowly build a map of your emotions, your weak points, and the places where you're easiest to influence. And from there, they manipulate quietly. What does Stoicism teach you in this kind of situation? Epictetus once said, "The wise man does not expose his inner world to those unworthy, because the soul needs sacred space to be protected." But here's the question. How much of your soul have you handed over just to keep a relationship that feels safe? How many times have you spoken your hopes out loud, only to watch things fall apart afterward? How many dreams did you share, only to see them fade without reason? Maybe you tell yourself, it's just a coincidence. But when coincidences repeat, they're no longer coincidences. Marcus Aurelius once warned, observe the consequences, not just the words. So what are the consequences here? Every time you share something important, things feel heavier afterward. Every time you confide in them, you feel like you've lost a part of your strength. Every time you speak your truth, you're left picking up the scattered pieces of your trust. Here's a truth. Not everyone who asks deserves an answer, and not everyone who listens truly wants you to rise. There are people who seek information not to walk the path with you, but to control the path, not to uplift you, but to gain leverage, especially in your most vulnerable moments. And they don't need to threaten you to do it. They just sit quietly, nod, occasionally say things like, "Oh, that's great. You're really talented. Just be careful." And before you know it, you've said more than you should have. You opened the doors to your heart. You led them inside, because you thought they were harmless. But those who seem harmless, when they've gathered enough, can cause the most harm. Because you trusted, you let your guard down. And once you lose control of your information, you also lose control of your emotions. Stoicism doesn't teach you to shut yourself off, but it does teach you to draw clear boundaries between what's sacred and what should not be so easily revealed. Information is energy. Information is power. And the one who holds more of it often controls the course of the relationship. They can use silence to make you anxious. They can delay responses to make you feel guilty. They can bring up something you once said, right when you're most fragile, just to make you feel unstable again. That is not love. That is manipulation, painted in the colors of concern. So how do you recognize this type of person earlier? It's simple. After every conversation, ask yourself, what did I give away? And what did they give back? If you're always the one opening up, and they're always withholding, if you speak honestly, and they only reply vaguely, if you feel exposed after each interaction, while they remain untouched, that's a clear sign. This relationship is out of balance, and any imbalance, left unchecked, leads to manipulation. You don't need to cut them off immediately, but you do need to reclaim your power, the power to keep things to yourself, the power to remain silent, the power to say nothing until you're ready. Marcus Aurelius once gave a very simple piece of advice. Often, the best way to protect yourself is to say nothing. And in a world where everyone wants to ask, to talk, to update, your silence isn't distance. It's the sign of someone who is finally returning to self-mastery. There's a type of person that's hard to identify. They don't hurt you with harsh words. They don't publicly put you down. They don't yell, insult, or act controlling. On the contrary, they're gentle, very caring, very understanding. They always show up at the right time, when you're weak, when you need encouragement, when you have no one else to talk to. You think, finally, someone who understands me. You believe, this person really cares about how I feel. You start to open up. You begin letting them deeper into your emotional world. But then you notice something strange. The more they care, the smaller you feel. The more they listen, the more lost you become. The closer they get, the guiltier you feel, even though you haven't done anything wrong. That's when you need to pause and recognize you're being emotionally manipulated by someone who's mastered the disguise of concern. Emotional manipulation doesn't always come through criticism or threats. It can come through sweet words, through gentle gestures, through a constant, sympathetic presence. But what they want isn't your happiness. It's your dependence on their care. Stoicism doesn't see emotions as weakness, but Stoicism clearly warns, any feeling that clouds your reason is a form of temptation. Think back to the last time you shared something deeply personal. They responded with care, but beneath their words was a hidden message. Without me, you probably would have fallen apart. You really need me in your life. No one else can understand you like I do. Those statements sound harmless, even comforting, but in truth, they are emotional hooks. They tether you to that person. They make you believe you can't get through things on your own. Without them, you start asking for their opinion on every decision. You feel uneasy if they don't text back. You feel guilty turning down their invitations. You feel you owe them through your presence, your attention, your transparency. And day by day, you lose something precious, the ability to govern your own emotions. Epictetus once said, "A free person is someone who doesn't need others to approve in order to feel worthy." But emotional manipulation makes you forget that. It makes you feel like If you don't respond at the right time, in the right way, meeting their expectations, you're a bad person. You fear disappointing them. You fear being seen as ungrateful. You fear losing someone who was there when you were most vulnerable. But let's be honest, were they really there for you, or for the role they played in your life? Here's a hard truth. Not everyone who stands by you when you fall wants to see you rise. Because when you rise, when you grow strong, when you no longer need anyone, they feel they've lost control. They may be the first to comfort you when you collapse, but also the last to support you when you're ready to move forward. Because they don't love you. They love their role in your story. They love the feeling of saving you. They love how they look when you're still broken. Stoicism teaches you to observe this carefully, because the greatest danger doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those you mistook for companions. If someone makes you feel guilty for living your truth, if someone always makes you feel like you need them, instead of encouraging your independence, if someone uses their help as leverage to demand lifelong gratitude, then you're not being cared for. You're being manipulated under the disguise of love. Look closely at that relationship. Do they truly celebrate your growth? Do they encourage your independence? Or always say, "Let me help you"? Do they use your emotions as weapons? Whenever things don't go their way, do they use past pain to keep you attached to them in the present? If the answer is yes, then it's time to step back. You don't need to act tough to confront them. You just need to be clear-headed enough to reclaim emotional ownership. You don't owe anyone a lifetime of gratitude just because they stood by you during a hard time. Gratitude is necessary, but letting them control your emotional life is the end of your inner freedom. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "No one can make you feel small unless you give them that power. And if you've accidentally given them that power, now is the time to take it back. Not with anger, but with calm clarity, by stepping away from the space where your feelings are being controlled, by returning to a life where you're independent in your thoughts, your choices, and your emotions. You don't need anyone to save you if you were never truly drowning. You just need silence to realize the one who truly loves you is the one who makes you believe you can stand on your own." There is a form of manipulation more subtle than threats, insults, or overt control. It's planting in you a fear of abandonment, a vague but deeply rooted fear, a nameless feeling, yet clearly present in every decision you make. You begin to live cautiously. You think twice before you speak. You adjust yourself, not to improve, but to fit their expectations. You hesitate to share your truth, afraid it might hurt them. You hold back from doing what you want, fearing they'll feel left out. Day by day, you shrink. You pull back. You become a safer, more agreeable, more controllable version of yourself. And the danger is, you don't even realize it. You think it's love. You think it's compromise. You think it's the only way to keep the relationship from falling apart. But in reality, you're living in fear of losing someone you believe you can't live without. This is the third sign. You're being manipulated through emotional dependency, a fear of abandonment that's being nurtured deliberately. Stoicism calls this a form of spiritual enslavement, the kind that steals your inner freedom without raising its voice. Epictetus once said, "We are not disturbed by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens." And fearing the loss of someone before it even happens is the fastest way to surrender your power over your own life. A skilled manipulator doesn't need chains to confine you. They only need to plant a belief inside you. Without them, you'll be lost. Without them, no one will understand you. Without them, you'll be alone again, broken. And then, you believe it. Once you believe it, you start adjusting. You stay silent when you disagree. You yield when you're being pressured. You endure instead of speaking up because you're afraid. Afraid of losing. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of being left with no one beside you. But let's be honest, is someone who makes you live in fear truly the person you want beside you? Marcus Aurelius once said, "When you fear losing something, it already owns you." Love doesn't make you afraid. Only dependency does. Love doesn't make you lose your voice. Only manipulation does. Maybe you've heard lines like these. "I can't handle it if you leave. If you do this, I'll disappear from your life. I don't want to become a stranger. But if you keep acting like this," these may sound like pain, like heartbreak, like a plea for closeness. But behind them lies a quiet demand. "If you don't behave the way I want, you'll be abandoned." And then you start fearing. The fear of being left behind, the fear of being the one to blame, the fear of carrying the burden of a breakup. In Stoicism, there's a concept called apatheia, a state of not being ruled by negative emotions, especially the fear of loss. Someone who lives with a Stoic mindset isn't cold, distant, or detached. They simply don't allow anyone to have the power to make them abandon themselves for the sake of a relationship. Ask yourself, do you still say what you truly think when you're around them? Do you feel safe expressing different opinions? Or do you avoid conflict at all costs? Are you being careful not to be left behind instead of being your true self? If yes, then you're not being controlled by them directly. You're being controlled by the fear they planted in you. Maybe they didn't mean to. Maybe they're afraid too. But that doesn't change one truth. You are being manipulated by a kind of love that comes with conditions. Conditional love says, "I love you if you follow me. I'll stay if you don't hurt me. I care about you as long as you don't disappoint me." And if you break any of those unspoken rules, they withdraw. They go silent. They create distance. They make you feel like the one who's done something wrong. That is not love. That is emotional bargaining. An invisible contract where you are always the one expected to stay silent just to keep them from leaving. You were not born to keep a relationship alive through fear. You didn't come into this world to trade your peace for someone who won't let you be yourself. Remember this. If someone truly loves you, they won't make you live in fear of losing them. If someone truly values you, they won't punish your honesty with distance. If someone truly stays, they won't make you shrink every day just to be safe. You don't need to fight them. You just need to pause and return to your right to live as an independent soul. Epictetus once reminded, "Remember, you lose no one. If they leave, because you dared to live honestly. And if you're afraid of losing them, it may be because you already lost yourself long ago." One of the most exhausting forms of manipulation doesn't come from angry or abusive people. It comes from those who speak beautifully, who sound wise, who seem profound, but live in contradiction. They speak of love, yet act with control. They speak of kindness, yet punish you with silence. They say, honesty is key in all relationships, yet they hide important things from you. They talk about freedom, yet make you feel guilty whenever you live true to yourself. This is the kind of person Stoicism warns us about. Those who use moral language to cover up their lack of self-mastery. They don't have to be bad people. They may be well-read, intelligent, articulate. They may quote scripture, philosophy, and beautiful sayings about goodness, compassion, and noble living. But the closer you get, the more you feel something off. Their words don't lead you to light. They make you question your own clarity. Marcus Aurelius once warned, "Let not the elegance of words blur your observation. Those who live rightly do not need to speak much." The problem lies here. These individuals often build a strong image of moral authority. So strong, in fact, that when you start to doubt them, you begin to question yourself. You wonder, am I being too sensitive? Am I judging them unfairly? Am I selfish for not responding to their kindness? But deep down, you know something isn't real. You sense a gap between what's being said and what you feel when you're around them. You feel suffocated. You feel pressure not to disappoint. You feel as if you're living under a moral standard you didn't choose, but must follow because they're always right. And that is how manipulation works. They don't use power to force you. They use rightness to make you afraid of opposing them. This is a unique form of control because it makes you feel like you're never enough. You're constantly trying to live up to their ideal, trying not to seem shallow, ignorant, or careless, trying not to be exposed by reasoning you're not prepared to counter. Epictetus once said, "There is nothing more dangerous than a person who uses reason but lacks virtue." So, ask yourself, are they using philosophy to lift you up or to make you dependent on their approval? Do they practice what they preach, or are they simply skilled speakers with selfish behaviors? Do they help you see yourself more clearly, or leave you more confused about who you are? Someone with true wisdom won't need your obedience. They won't need you to agree with everything they say. They won't need you to fit into their standards. They will encourage independent thought. They will respect your differences. They will quietly step back when you need space to find your own answers. But if someone always presents themselves as the enlightened one, the one who is always right, wise, spiritually aware, yet never allows you to have your own voice, then it's time to take a deeper look. That's not wisdom, that's ego, dressed in moral robes. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "True humility doesn't need recognition. It's silent, deep, and expressed through action." Those who manipulate through virtue will never admit they're manipulating. They'll say things like, "I just want what's best for you. I'm only reminding you. I'm not forcing you." But if you really understood, you wouldn't choose that path. It sounds gentle, but what you feel is pressure. You no longer dare to choose what you want. You no longer dare to do what you believe is right. You begin to question yourself every time you think differently. So what can you do? Stoicism doesn't ask you to argue, to react, or to condemn. It only asks you to observe and live with integrity. You don't need to say anything. Just remain silent and live true. Someone truly sincere will respect your path. Someone who's manipulating will begin to find you difficult, resistant, ungrateful. Don't fear that. Don't fear being misunderstood. Don't fear being labeled unwilling to listen. You don't need to submit to a moral system just because someone speaks it beautifully. You only need to stay true to yourself and the clear principles you've chosen to live by. And if your principle is this, to lie awake, free from dependency, and never trade clarity for approval, then walk that path, even if few support it, because that is the path that leads to freedom. Have you ever felt something like this? You start your day in a good mood. Everything is flowing. You have clear plans. You feel light, focused, and ready to move forward. Then, you run into that person. Or maybe it's just a short phone call, a few messages, a coffee meet-up, a casual conversation, and afterward, something feels off. Your mind begins to sink. Your thoughts blur. You start doubting yourself. You feel anxious about things you were once certain of. You feel confused, trapped in a cloud of unnamed, negative emotions. And strangely, this happens every time you meet them. You feel like something inside you is being drained. Not your money, not your time, but your energy. This is the final sign. And perhaps the clearest one. This person carries an energy that's misaligned with the path you're trying to walk. even if they don't do anything outwardly wrong. No insults, no direct control, no obvious pressure. Still, their presence pulls you down. Stoicism doesn't often use mystical language like energy, but it speaks very clearly about the impact of relationships on the mind. Epictetus once said, "If you spend time around someone who has a fever, you may get a fever. If you're around a disturbed mind, it becomes harder to keep your own peace." The problem is, we don't trust our intuition. We say things like, "Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. Maybe I'm just tired today. Maybe it's just a coincidence." So we keep showing up. We keep talking. We keep staying in a connection where every interaction leaves a layer of dust on our clarity. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice every time you talk about your plans, things fall apart. Every time you speak of your dreams, you lose the motivation. Every time you try to grow, you end up second-guessing yourself. They don't need to say anything harsh. Maybe it's just a frown, a casual comment, a seemingly harmless remark, and suddenly you lose touch with yourself. You feel weak. You feel wrong. You feel like you need to rethink everything. This is what passive manipulation looks like. It doesn't attack, it casts doubt, just enough to make you stop walking forward. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Stay close to those who bring clarity to your mind. Step away from those who make you unsure of yourself." The most dangerous form of manipulation doesn't come from aggressive actions. It comes from the subtle, repeated presence of someone who constantly clouds your inner world. They didn't do anything obviously wrong, and because of that, you feel guilty for even thinking about leaving. You tell yourself, "I must be too sensitive." Maybe they didn't mean it. But Stoicism doesn't ask you to wait for proof. It only asks one thing: truth. And the truth is, you're not yourself anymore. Every time you're around them, you start living with subtle defensiveness. You walk more cautiously. You speak, but always monitor their reaction. You're afraid to upset them. You're afraid of being ungrateful if you walk away. You're afraid of hurting them, even though they've been quietly draining your spirit day after day. If you're living in those fears, remember this: you don't need a perfect reason to protect your clarity. You only need one question. After spending time with them, do I feel clearer or more confused? Epictetus taught, "The cost of preserving peace of mind is always less than the cost of fixing a mind that's already been disturbed." And if you're in a connection where each interaction takes you days to recover from, then maybe you're investing your mental energy in the wrong place. By now, you've heard all 5 signs. Each one a mirror, not to accuse, but to illuminate, because the person manipulating you may not even realize it, and you may not realize how long you've allowed it to happen. But the moment you become aware, the moment you sit still long enough to observe the full picture, the moment you stop reacting and start reflecting, that's when you reclaim the inner authority that was once stolen. Stoicism doesn't teach avoidance. It teaches confrontation of the truth. And the truth is, any connection that makes you lose your grounding does not deserve a central place in your life. By now, you may have recognized at least one of the 5 signs showing up in your own life. Maybe a familiar face came to mind, a voice, a glance, a type of interaction that always made you shrink, even though they never raised their voice. But there's a more important question waiting to be asked. Why did we let it continue for so long? Why could someone, without using force or setting clear conditions, reach so deep inside and begin to control us from within? The answer isn't about them. It's within you. Stoicism doesn't teach you to blame others. It teaches you to observe where you failed to stand firm, not to self-criticize, but to understand Because every form of external manipulation begins with an inner vulnerability that has not yet been faced. So what makes you so susceptible? Maybe it's the fear of being abandoned, so you cling to others at any cost, even when the price is your own clarity. Maybe it's the deep craving to be validated, so you overextend yourself, trying to fit into the version of you someone else wants, even when it leaves you exhausted every day. Maybe it's the inability to trust your intuition. You feel something is wrong, but you don't trust your own sense because the other person seems smarter, wiser, maybe even morally superior. Or deeper still, maybe you're carrying a wounded inner child, one who was once abandoned, one who wasn't believed, one who had to earn love by pleasing others. And now, that same pattern plays out again, in relationships that seem adult, but are silently repeating your earliest wounds. You say you're being manipulated, but maybe you learned how to be manipulated a long time ago, and you don't know any other way but compromise. Stoicism calls this inner slavery, not because you're chained, but because you don't yet realize you can be free. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We suffer not because the world is cruel, but because we haven't yet learned to stand firm inside ourselves." And one of the deepest truths in Stoicism is this: no one can control you unless you let them. No one can make you small unless you abandon yourself. No one can enter the sacred core of your being unless you open the door. So the question is, when did that door open? Was it the day you believed, "I have to please others to be loved"? Was it the moment you chose silence, submission, or keeping the peace just to avoid conflict? Was it the day you said, "They helped me once, I can't speak badly of them now"? You were not wrong for opening your heart. You were not weak for longing to be understood. You are not to blame for trusting someone and allowing them to touch the most tender parts of you. But Stoicism did not come to comfort you. It came to wake you up, to call forth the strongest part of you, to revive the courage that once lived inside you, long before anyone made you doubt your own worth. Epictetus said, "If you want to be free, learn to build boundaries." And that is what you need now. Not a breakup, not a dramatic ending, but a return to the inner lines you never should have erased. A boundary that clearly separates love from manipulation, a boundary of peace between being truly heard and being subtly controlled, a sacred boundary between genuine care and disguised intrusion, masked as morality. You don't need to get angry. You don't need to expose anyone. You don't need to win the argument. You only need to rise, silently, silent, but not weak, silent, but fully sovereign. Silence becomes your declaration. I will no longer trade my clarity, just to hold on to something that clouds me. And when you do that, you're not just walking away from someone, you are walking away from a former version of yourself. The one who believed, love means accepting everything. And so, Stoicism doesn't teach conditional love, but it teaches clarity in love. Clarity sharp enough to discern who's entering your life with light and who is carrying shadows they won't face themselves. You don't need to save them. You don't even need to save yourself. You just need to sit, to look honestly, and to stop pretending you're okay when you're not. And from that honesty, you begin to reclaim something long lost: sovereignty, integrity, and freedom, not just in action, but in thought. You've just walked through a journey that wasn't easy to hear, but it was necessary. And maybe, in a few parts of that journey, you went silent, not because you're weak, but because you saw something that felt too real, a face you once trusted, a voice you once leaned on, a relationship you never questioned, now revealed under a new light, off balance, and a little cold inside. I'm not here to scare you. I don't want you to judge anyone either. But I do hope, if you're still in a relationship that disconnects you from yourself, that you will no longer be silent. You don't need to say anything out loud. Just stop silencing your own truth. Take a step back and revisit the 5 signs you've just encountered. They constantly extract information, yet never share anything about themselves. You gradually become the storyteller of the relationship, while they stay in the role of analyst and observer. The more you talk, the more they uncover your weak points, giving them more ways to control. They manipulate through fake concern. They always appear just in time when you're weak, creating a sense of dependence. But soon, you find yourself lost, disoriented, and afraid to live as your true self. They make you feel small, dependent, and afraid to be honest. Every time you're real, you sense the risk of losing them. You no longer have freedom over your own emotions or decisions. They preach morality, but act in contradiction. They're eloquent, intellectual, articulate, but you're the one always compromising. You're trapped in a moral framework they created, feeling never enough. Their energy leaves you disoriented after every encounter. Each conversation, each meeting, leaves behind a layer of fog in your mind. You feel yourself shrinking, losing touch with your dreams, your clarity, your sense of direction. If you saw yourself in any of these signs, that's not a reason to feel ashamed. It's not an accusation. It's a gentle invitation. It's time to choose again. Choose what? Choose who gets to enter your mental space. Choose who is truly worthy of your deepest truths. Choose which relationships are healthy and which ones are stealing your inner freedom. Stoicism doesn't tell you to walk away from every complex relationship. It simply teaches you to observe deeply and live with enough inner strength to discern wisely. You have the right to love. You have the right to be close. You have the right to forgive. You have the right to hold on. But what you should never do is ignore your own intuition just to keep someone who clouds your clarity, because no one deserves your presence. If the cost is the disappearance of yourself, remember this. Someone who truly loves you won't make you question your worth. Someone who's safe won't make you fear losing them every day. Someone who's kind will never use morality to dismiss your real emotions. On this Stoic path, there is no road that is always easy, but there's always one anchor that never leaves you, your awakened reason. When you step back, without reacting, without judging, just looking clearly, you will know what you need to do. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to catch someone in the wrong. You don't need to win. You only need to be clear. Clear about what you feel. Clear about the freedom you have or have lost. Clear about your own worth. And whether someone is protecting that worth or slowly breaking it. When you are clear, your silence is already an action. You don't need to shout. You don't need to exit loudly. You just need to stand firm. And once you stand firm, what no longer belongs will quietly fall away, or you will be strong enough to walk away without feeling like you've lost anything at all. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "When you know the path you're on, you don't need permission from anyone to keep walking." And my hope for you, after this reflection, is that you begin to walk forward again, with clarity, with courage, with a kind of love, not aimed outward, but finally turned inward. If you're still here, even now, I believe, it's not because you want to blame someone, it's not because you enjoy labeling someone as manipulative, it's not because you're looking for an excuse to walk away from a relationship. I believe you stayed because you're tired of pretending to be okay, while being around someone who keeps making you feel less and less okay, tired of holding together something that no longer feels whole, tired of not knowing how to speak up without hurting anyone, even though you've been the one hurting all along. And if that's true, I only want to say one thing: you're not wrong. You're not unkind. You just need to come home. Come home to an inner space that's no longer dominated. A place where you don't have to edit your feelings to please someone else. A place where you don't need to justify why you need silence. A place where you don't need permission to be real. Stoicism doesn't teach you how to avoid pain. It teaches you not to become bitter after pain. And that only happens when you have the courage to step out of dependency and stand again on the ground of your own being. Maybe you'll be alone for a while. That's okay. The awakened often walk alone for a stretch. Maybe you'll feel empty. No more texts every day. No more check-ins. No more someone constantly asking how you are. But then you'll realize there's nothing lonelier than being with someone while still having to fight for acceptance, and nothing warmer than being alone while still holding clarity within. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to forgive them quickly. You only need to do one thing: stop handing over the brightest part of yourself to someone who isn't ready to cherish it. Maybe one day they'll understand. Maybe they never will. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that from now on, you know, what makes you doubt yourself is not love. What makes you feel small is not companionship. What leaves you in mental chaos after every interaction is not connection. And anything that trades away your clarity is not worthy of a place in your life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A free person is not someone who's free from influence, but someone who chooses what is allowed to influence them." Freedom isn't about walking away from people. It's about being able to stand in any relationship without losing yourself. I know, you've done it before. You've trusted the wrong person. You've compromised. You've endured. You've stayed silent just to avoid hurting someone else. But from now on, I hope you won't do that to yourself anymore. You can still be kind, still listen, still feel grateful. But you also have the right to set boundaries, the right to keep your own space, the right to walk away, not out of anger, but because you refuse to stray from your own path any longer. You don't need to be right. You just need to be clear. Clear, so you can't be manipulated. Clear, so you won't repeat it. Clear, so you no longer stand on the sidelines of your own life. While someone else sits in the center, close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, is there someone taking up so much space in my mind that I can no longer hear my own voice? If yes, start with a little distance, not to run from them, but to return to yourself. If you're still hesitating, I won't push you. I'll only offer this prayer. For anyone on the journey of releasing dependency, may you stay awake, even through sweet words. May you be still enough to see what's real and what's controlled, dressed as care. May you return to the free self, who doesn't need permission to live honestly. And may you, after everything, still carry softness, not for others, but for the wounded part within you. If you've made it all the way to this closing part, maybe you're still not ready to leave someone behind. That's okay. I don't need you to act. I only hope that from this moment on, you never turn your back on your own intuition again, because that intuition is the first whisper of freedom